Good evening, this is Goldie, also known as Mr. Anecdotal. It's Wednesday, November 10th, 2010. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. Excuse me. I was at a party last Saturday and I got asked 2 or 3 times where I was on the spectrum, the political spectrum. I got to answer the way I like to answer. I'm not on the spectrum. Remember the movie with Russell Crowe, A Beautiful Mind? What I'm trying to do here is make connections, continuing making connections and using an understanding of those connections to, number 1, figure out the real problem, and number 2, come up with solutions. However, in this rant and the conversations that I have between rants makes us all a beautiful mind, looking for the connections, problems, and solutions. Here's a brief summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'll talk about BP on the North Slope of Alaska, with miles and miles of dangerously corroding pipelines complying with regulations that they wrote. I'll talk about torture and revisionist history. I'll talk about privacy surveillance and that darn old slippery slope. I'll talk a little bit more about education. Last week it was reported in the Austin American-Statesman that there were thousands of miles of BP-owned pipelines carrying hazardous materials on the North Slope in Alaska, and that most are corroding and near the disaster point. I brought up weeks ago the concept of commonized costs, privatized profits. That concept is that the oil companies, in this case BP, are using the regulations that they themselves wrote to get the taxpayer, and not the users of the oil, to pay for the upkeep of the pipelines. There are 2 points here. Number 1, we want the regulations to be written correctly and not by BP with any increases in costs paid for by the consumer of the product, whatever the product is, oil, gas, or whatever. And number 2, we want the commons protected by our government and not with taxpayer dollars, excluding the cost of drafting and implementing truly efficient and targeted regulations that are not influenced by bought and paid for politicians. Excuse me. 2 interesting people have books out. Not that they're really interesting people, but they are interesting. Both regarding revisionist history. George Bush, that's George W. Bush, trying to revise his history of the presidency, and Rick Perry trying to revise his history as a big government guy. We all revise our histories, by the way. Excuse me. For George W. Bush, it is his legacy, and a lot of the questions are regarding waterboarding and other torture techniques. For Rick Perry, self-professed small government guy, he instituted steroid testing of all student athletes in Texas. He tried to impose HPV vaccines for all 6th grade girls to benefit his drug company donors. He took money from the federal government, hundreds of millions, to balance the budget. And this is after rejecting unemployment funds that would have closed the gap, stating that he didn't want all of the federal obligations that there were. And then he quietly accepted that other money to balance the budget, which he's going to do again this year. We have a huge $18 to $20 billion gap here in Texas right now. As to George W. Bush, well, he was just a continuation of long-standing American tradition of doing whatever it took, so long as his attorneys said it was okay. Shut your eyes, George, don't ask. What is waterboarding? And by the way, when you approved it for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, did you approve it for as long as it took, up to a year, or the 183 times that they did it? Did you ever read detailed Israeli and other intelligence services reports that torture does not work? This is similar to the argument against capital punishment. It's not fairly administered, so therefore we shouldn't have it. Well, torture doesn't work, and it has a lot of big downsides besides it not working. So again, I don't understand why we actually do it. Out of the Austin American-Statesman, November 4th, 2010, Bush admits he approved waterboarding. It's detailed that he actually approved the technique, which has been called an enhanced interrogation technique, to shield the actual use of the word torture. They do a lot of that, which is a lot of 1984 speak. Since the 2003 waterboarding of Mohammed and similar interrogations of 2 other CIA detainees in 2002 and 2003. By the way, the word detainee bothers me. Declare war and call them prisoners of war. Anyway, the two other CIA detainees in 2002 and 2003, the intelligence agency has forsworn the technique, which involves pouring water on someone's face while strapped to a board, to convince them they will shortly drown. President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder have both said waterboarding is an act of torture, prescribed by international law. But the Obama administration hasn't sought to punish former Bush administration officials for approving it. Georgetown University law professor David Cole, a longstanding critic of Bush's interrogation and detention policies, called prosecution unlikely. The fact that he did admit it, Bush did admit it, suggests he believes he is politically immune from being held accountable, Cole said. But politics can change. Mr. Cole, politics are changing, and ignoring whether the Obama administration still has black ops sites where torture goes on of detainees, the House Republicans are looking to impeach Obama. He'll be tied up in the Stupak inquiry, and the status quo will continue. No one will be prosecuted for this egregious breach of U.S. and international law. Similarly, in the Washington Post, November 9, 2010, in a story by Jerry Marcon, quotes, "No charges in CIA tape destruction. It looks like everyone involved in all of these sordid, impeachable violations of law will get off scot-free. The Justice Department will not file criminal charges over the destruction of CIA videotapes depicting the harsh interrogation of terrorism suspects, limiting the legal fallout from one of the Bush administration's most fraught legacies," officials said Tuesday. After an exhaustive probe that lasted nearly 3 years, federal prosecutor John Durham concluded that he would not bring a criminal case against the CIA officers. The burning of the 92 tapes on November 9, 2005 was authorized in a cable sent by Jose Rodriguez Jr., head of the agency's Directorate of Operations. The tapes showed the interrogations of two high-profile detainees. Sources have said they depicted waterboarding, a form of simulated drowning that human rights groups and Obama administration officials say is torture. As a result of that investigation, Mr. Durham has concluded that he will not pursue criminal charges for the destruction of the interrogation videotapes, Justice Department spokesman Matthew Miller said. Yet even as the government closed one chapter in the investigation of Bush administration interrogation practices after September 11, 2001 attacks, other parts of the probe remained open. Sources familiar with Durham's investigation said authorities have not ruled out filing charges against officials who may have misled investigators during the probe into the tape's destruction. Durham is also conducting a related and potentially more explosive investigation into whether CIA employees and contractors broke the law in conducting interrogations at black site prisons. Sources said that probe remains active. Don't believe it. The political debate over whether the Bush administration violated civil rights in the years after September 11th or was only trying to protect Americans also showed no signs of ending. In an interview Monday with NBC News, former President George W. Bush defended the waterboarding of terrorism suspects. On Tuesday, human rights groups criticized the Justice Department's decision in the CIA videotapes case and cited what they called Bush's legacy of torture. This decision is stunning. There is ample evidence of a cover-up regarding the destruction of the tapes, ACLU Executive Director Anthony D. Romero said. The Bush administration was instructed by a court of law not to destroy evidence of torture, but that's exactly what it did. By the way, they never said that those items were torture. Scam of words. C. Dixon Osborne, a spokesman for Human Rights First, said members of the group are disappointed that the Justice Department has chosen not to pursue charges in this case, but remain hopeful that Durham's pending inquiries will produce criminal charges. CIA Director Leon E. Panetta said that he welcomed the news and that the agency has cooperated with Durham's investigation from the start. We will continue, of course, to cooperate with the Department of Justice on any other aspects of the former program that it reviews, he said. But a former senior CIA operations officer speaking on the condition of anonymity in order to comment freely questioned the decision not to bring charges and said the tapes were not destroyed in total innocence. To my understanding, there was a standing order from a federal judge that said not to destroy the tapes. That trumps any inside the CIA legal call, the ex-official said. Rodriguez, a top CIA official from 2004 to 2007, authorized the tape's destruction and has been a key focus of the inquiry. Sources said Tuesday that he will not be charged. Robert S. Bennett, an attorney for Rodriguez, said he is pleased that the Justice Department has decided not to go forward against Mr. Rodriguez. This is the right decision because of the facts and the law. Jose Rodriguez is an American hero, a true patriot who only wanted to protect his people and his country, Bennett said. John A. Rizzo, the CIA's former acting general counsel, said in an email that the Justice Department's announcement will come as a relief to the agency and the many innocent employees who found themselves ensnared in this nearly 3-year investigation. Rizzo was not made aware of the decision to destroy the tapes and said he was angered by it. Many innocent employees, I guess they were just following orders, like the Nazi troops in the concentration camps. At least after World War II, those guards were brought up on charges. As I've said before, this is more of the same, and it is a lot scarier because it is a democratic administration that is supposed to be about civil rights and civil liberties. Think, Democrats, is this what you voted for? It's almost as though the Tea Partiers and libertarians are the only people that will come out against this type of behavior. Democrats, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Torture doesn't work. End of story. And I ask, why do they hate our freedom? Going to privacy and surveillance. You're going to be hearing a lot from the presidential candidates on their views of privacy. With Mike Huckabee appearing on Judge Napolitano's Freedom Watch this past weekend, it was his anger at the intrusive T-1000 full-body scanners at airports. Interesting that he would pick that one particular intrusion. What about cameras? What about the X-ray vans? What about tracking all emails, all Facebook, all texts? With Sarah Palin and Rick Perry, I bet they say the same things up through the primaries. It will be that we have to give up certain rights that we all agree we need to do, or that we all agree we need to give up. Actually, they will use different words so as to avoid the actual phrase, giving up of rights to be safer. Interestingly, their personalities will overcome, or try to overcome, real capital C constitutional conservatives, as they call themselves now, or Tea Partiers' views on limited wars to justify the one war in Afghanistan. Actually, Goldy likes to say 4 undeclared wars: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and Yemen. You will hear the word security means we need to be fighting them over there. And that is George W. Bush's term. So we'll probably change that to away from American soil or something like that. They're not going to use the exact words that George W. Bush used. In any event, these candidates for president will have to stay tough on terror in order to get elected, which certainly shows us how ignorant our electorate is. Is this political bluster or a conspiracy to bring us further down the path with T-1000s, I like to call them that, full-body scanners on the streets? Austin American-Statesman, October 28, 2010. U.S. air travel security rules spark debate. European officials accuse the United States of imposing unnecessary and overly intrusive air travel security measures, calling on the Obama administration Wednesday to re-examine policies ranging from x-raying shoes to online security checks for Europeans. It seems the Europeans have just woken up to some online screening that is done to European passengers coming to the U.S. And I have to ask you Europeans, idiots, now you care? I mean, seriously, is this the time that you now care? Because you've got a little bit of a delay in the line, now you come up with privacy issues? As an aside, this reminds me of every injury I have ever gotten in sports. When I got a finger in the eye, I started wearing goggles. When I injured my back, I started doing stretching of the back. When I injured my hamstring, I started stretching my hamstrings. When I injured my calf, I started stretching my calves. In other words, with each security breach, shoe bomber, underwear bomber, liquid risk, ink cartridge risk, and box cutter risk that is recognized, a new restriction is imposed to try and limit that risk. This is the true slippery slope. As with each newly identified risk, the U.S. population seems willing to lose some right in order to guard against that specific risk. If you think about it, when there's a problem with liquids on the plane, then we stopped being able to carry liquids on the plane. It had to be in a 3-ounce thing in a quart bag. And that was right when airlines started charging, by the way, for carry-on bags, for check bags. Okay. Now, if you think about every risk that could ever happen, any type of terrorist attack, and you think about a long enough time horizon, you would find that every real risk that is encountered will be met by a new intrusion. Just like each new injury made me stretch a new muscle. Now, the obvious difference is that once I've pulled every muscle and then I start stretching every muscle before working out, eventually I am now able to actually guard against every muscle injury because I'm stretching every muscle. If you use that as a metaphor for us losing rights to guard against security risks, you will see that it's impossible to do. And as I have said before, I am willing to run some risks, some terrorism risks. And we all do this even by getting into a car. I mean, that's not a terrorist risk, that's just a risk of dying. I'm willing to run some risks of a terrorist attack to protect the most sacred of fundamental rights, the constitutional principle of being free from unreasonable search and seizure. Let me read the Fourth Amendment for you again. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. Supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Seriously, how can we say that the terrorists are not winning? We have totally given up huge amounts of privacy and rights under the Patriot Act and various regulations promulgated thereunder. Are we not going down the road to 1984 or total recall with T-1000s as you walk out the door of your house? T-1000 X-ray scanners everywhere. Because as each of these attacks happens, each time it happens, we're going to say it's okay to give up some of our rights in order to maybe protect against this. Maybe. Saw a movie yesterday. Let me give you a quote from it. I would rather have a few casualties from mistakes than lose the whole base and all its personnel from carelessness. Trust no one. Your commie has no regard for human life, even his own. He will even be wearing the uniform of our own troops. This was said by General Jack Ripper. Gotta love it, in Dr. Strangelove. What a metaphor for today's fears of terrorism. Watch that movie again, because all you have to do is insert the word Muslim, and you will hear everything that you always hear on Fox News. Let's talk a little bit about education. Here's a post. It was actually a Facebook post from an adult friend of mine. I live in a world that I can't touch the fabrics. I can't stand the radio, and I have no idea what or how people come up with the statements they make. I've turned into my grandfather. I miss cotton and other natural fabrics. I miss music. And I miss turning on the news and hearing facts. I replied to her post asking, "Did you think Walter Cronkite gave you the facts?" She replied that she is too young to have watched Cronkite. Here we go again. I will renew my call for abolition of all courses except modern American history, starting with today and working backwards. Is this person saying that what she hears on Fox is not the facts? Or is she saying that what she hears on MSNBC is not the facts? Or is she saying that what she hears on CNN, milquetoast CNN, is not the facts? This past week, Keith Olbermann got in trouble for not getting pre-approval of some political campaign contributions. The Democrats got all in a tizzy about how Fox has actual candidates doing shows and various commentators actually supporting candidates on air and lending their names Think Glenn Beck's rally at the mall and Sarah Palin speaking there. They're all missing the point. MSNBC lets you contribute if you tell them ahead of time. They are just a poorer example of Fox. Then they don't implement well. I don't turn on the TV without looking for everyone's motive with every story. How can I do otherwise? How can you? And how can my supposedly educated friend that wants the facts? Fox is as bad as MSNBC. The real problem is brought up in my call for a constitutional amendment limiting individual people to $100 donations maximum, and also limiting groups, corporations, and unions from giving any donations at all. The question is, the tougher question, and this is what happens when you get into the details, how do we limit these television networks' use of their bully pulpit to campaign for free for the candidates of their choice? Well, here's one way. A candidate for president must enroll or sign up 1 year prior to the election. If they do not, they cannot be a candidate. If they do sign up, they cannot have a TV show. Additionally, we can make it a rule that even though you invited Rand Paul's opponent to speak on your program, if they don't show up, Rand Paul cannot speak on that program. The details on my limitation of political spending gets a little dicey. I mean, these details do get a little dicey. I will admit. Let's keep talking and emailing and watching and trying to figure that out, even the details. But it sounds good. Let's make the candidates sign up a year ahead of time, and that'll end your shows on TV because everybody will know that you're running for office. We can do it with senators as well. All right. I said I was going to talk about education, and I mean real education. There's a story in today's Austin American-Statesman. No more campouts for school transfers. In Austin, there's a program that lets you opt out of your school and opt in to a different school. There are 86,000 students enrolled in Austin schools right now. The district approved 3,000 of the 4,000 transfer requests made for the current school year. Not too bad. 3/4 of all requests were granted. The parents used to have to wait in line and pitch tents overnight to get these slots. It sounds a lot like the Waiting for Superman charter school lottery, which I promise I will watch before next week's program. The Austin Independent School District is going to start a computerized lottery to allow these limited numbers of transfers to different schools. I have to ask, and this is a question, rhetorical question, why are the schools so different? They're in the same school district with the same testing and the same teachers, or maybe not the same teachers. Are administrators prohibited from moving teachers around the district to put at least one good teacher of English in an East Austin school? Okay, so it looks like we have identified a problem in education, and that is that there are perceived better schools within a school district than others. Why? I know we have busing, so why are there differences in the schools in the same district? It's a question we need to answer. There was an op-ed in the Washington Post from November 4th, 2010 by G.V. Ramanathan entitled, "How much math do we really need?" And when I saw that, I kind of liked it. Now, this guy's a professor emeritus of mathematics, statistics, and computer sciences somewhere. They didn't say where. He talks about how we as a nation have made numerous attempts to educate our children in math, starting with Sputnik. And if you don't know what that is, you have proved an earlier point I made about education. Go look it up. Which leads to two questions. One, are these efforts effective? A 2008 review by the Education Department found that the U.S. is at greater risk now than it was in 1983, and the National Assessment of Educational Progress math scores have remained stagnant since the 1980s. And the second question, how much math do you really need in everyday life? I love these questions, as I have opined in the past that people can't even figure out the tip on a dinner bill. And if the computers go down at Walmart, no sales can occur. The professor says that you need to ask yourself, how much math do you really need? And also ask the next 10 people you meet, say your plumber, your lawyer, your grocer, your mechanic, your physician, or even a math teacher. He's not asking this question rhetorically as I have in the past. I've even called for the abolition of teaching math and English to be replaced by an all-encompassing course in modern American history that would touch on all these subjects as students learned the history. They would learn counting the 50 states or the 13 original states. They would learn English as they parsed the words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and Glenn Beck's speech on the Mall. Yes, I would teach that speech. Another quote, "Those who do love math and science have been doing very well. Our graduate schools are the best in the world. This nation at risk has produced about 140 Nobel laureates since 1983, about as many as before 1983. As for the rest, there's no obligation to love math any more than grammar, composition, curfew, or washing up after dinner. Why create a need to make it palatable to all and spend taxpayers' money on pointless endeavors without demonstrable results or accountability?" Amen, brother. You may remember that I called for the abolition of public schooling and an end to all taxpayer subsidies and tax breaks for education in a prior rant. And all student loans, by the way. One of the points that I made was a question regarding what would be the cost of a college education without student loans. I thought it would be a lot lower. And occasionally, a blind squirrel finds a nut, or Mr. Anecdotal, me, finds some actual info to back up a claim. Excuse me. In an October 29, 2010 article in the Austin American Statesman by Tamar Lewin, lo and behold, reports find boost in federal aid offsets rise of college tuition. So reports find boost in federal aid offsets the rise of college tuition. Chicken or the egg? Seriously. The article talks about the 8% rise in tuition, room, and board for in-state universities, totaling $16,000 per year, and a 4.5% rise in tuition, room, and board for private colleges to $37,000 per year. Quotes, "The good news in the 2010 trends in college pricing and trends in student aid reports is that fast rising tuition costs have been accompanied by a huge increase in financial aid, which help keep down the actual amount students and families pay." This is stinky, by the way. In 2009-2010, students got $28 billion in Pell Grants, and that's $10 billion more than the year before, said Sandy Baum, the economist who is the lead author of the reports. When you look at how much students are actually paying on average, it is lower after adjusting for inflation than 5 years earlier. All right. Let me continue. Almost everybody has been helped by the federal government's increased spending on education. Almost everybody has been helped by the federal government's increased spending on education, Baum said, either through Pell Grants, which provide an average of $3,600 for low-income students, or through tax credits, which go further up the income scale. The increase in federal support this year was so large that, unlike former years, government aid surpassed institutional aid as the largest chunk of student aid. I gotta take a drink on that. All right. She says that everybody benefited. Well, let me tell you about two different parties that did not benefit. Goldy didn't, and all other taxpayers and the students. I know that's like three different parties, but call me a taxpayer. Think about the students whose increase in knowledge by going to college is not borne out through any statistics on higher education, or any statistics on jobs, or any statistics on getting into graduate schools. What the heck are we doing here? The Tea Partiers are right on one thing. All of this stuff is being done with any accountability or determination if it works, or a determination as to why we are using taxpayer funds for these programs. I say literally and rhetorically, abolish it all and tell me why we need any of it. This mathematician told us we don't need math. I agree. If you want to be an engineer, you'll go do it and you'll pay cash. I received an email from MoveOn.org, and it makes me cringe. Remember, MoveOn.org and I agree on at least one thing. that Exxon is not a person entitled to free speech rights. Let's say that Exxon and the Service Employees Union are not people entitled to free speech rights in the form of unlimited campaign contributions. Overturn Citizens United, we both say. However, it is true that they are funded by Democratic donors and support Democratic Party candidates. Please, Tea Partiers, ignore this latest message. Comma. This is what it says at the title of the email. The worst idea ever. I'm going to read a little part of it to you. Dear Move On member, the economy is in shambles. People everywhere are struggling to make ends meet. So naturally, Republicans are worried about the richest Americans. They're looking to make Bush's tax cuts for the rich, which expire at the end of the year, permanent. The worst part is that some right-wing Democrats have already come out and agreed with the Republicans' reckless approach, and the White House has signaled that they're open to compromising on this issue. This has to be the worst idea since, well, ever. And to show just how bad an idea it is, we've decided to gather 1 million reasons why the millionaire tax bailout is a bad idea. We'll use the ideas you submitted in a multimedia campaign around the country and stage a high-profile event to deliver them directly to Congress. Can you contribute a reason, or 5 or 10 right now? They can be as simple and short or creative as you want. Click here. All right. Let me take a breath. Extending the Bush tax cuts in a recession is the worst idea ever. That's what they're saying. Let me pause. Invading Iraq, invading Afghanistan, invading Pakistan, surveillance cameras everywhere, warrantless searches, the Patriot Act, porn x-rays in airports, mobile x-ray vans, electing a bunch of Republicans and expecting them to follow the actual will of the Tea Party, electing Obama and expecting him to not be more of the same or no worse than more of the same, not prosecuting the Bush administration for war crimes, allowing the regulated to write the regulations, not having term limits for congressmen and senators, allowing corporations and unions to donate as much as they want to political campaigns, having no revolving door policy for regulators and legislators about going into the businesses that they regulated while they were in office, not limiting campaign contributions to individuals, and then only to $100, and not doing it to $100, allowing the Corps of Engineers to rebuild the levees in New Orleans, allowing mountaintop removal mining upstream from drinking water supplies, using Fox News solely to get your news, using MSNBC solely to get your news. Okay. I guess I should send them an email with those items. So extending the Bush tax cuts in a recession looks like the best idea ever when put up against those 20 or so worst ideas ever. Those guys that Move On know how to not assimilate Republicans, Tea Partiers, and Libertarians. They are more concerned with party than with issues. Okay. As to some messages, the current message that you're going to be hearing from Republicans and Fox, and not necessarily from the Tea Party, is that they can only do so much. And in order to really cut spending, we need a Republican Senate and a Republican president. You're going to hear that for 2 years. You must watch the Jon Stewart interview of Chris Wallace on The Daily Show, November 3rd, 2010. Absolutely superior regarding Fox News. Chris Wallace is one of the more legitimate journalists on Fox News, maybe the only journalist on Fox News. Jon Stewart is what I thought was the best at what he does to Chris Wallace in that interview. That is the example of how to be a true interviewer. He has completely arrived, I'm talking about Jon Stewart, at least until the Rick Perry interview. The Rick Perry interview, which was earlier this week, governor of Texas, makes me think that Jon Stewart was not prepared to interview and ask tough questions. John, please leave the softball interviews for Greta Van Susteren and the rest of the Fox hacks. If you're not prepared, tell Rick you can't see him tonight. Answering some criticism about my rants, which came in an email, which I absolutely appreciate and need, about my rhetorical style. I'm not really trying to do anything other than get more thoughts out. That's really what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to make you laugh. I'm not trying to make you cry. I should stop being facetious about anything here. There needs to be no misunderstanding that I'm saying what I'm saying, so I'm going to try and cut those things out. As to public education, of course, I've called for the elimination of all public education. It is being said facetiously to garner true and heated responses from people, to help us all focus on the actual problems and maybe some real solutions. I've added a light over here, so I do not look as scary, which apparently I look pretty scary on these, sorry. However, I am doing a tutorial here, not an entertainment show. And if it turns off some people as being boring, I don't know, go work for Rand Paul, I guess. Let me give you something that really bothers me, and it has to do with my ego. When someone asks to be removed from my email list, it bothers me. When someone from the ACLU asks to be removed from my list, it really bothers me. A new friend this weekend reminded me that time heals all, and we all need to remember that phrase. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content of this conversation. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbesis, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. She can make anything look like anything. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. TicoAdventureLodge.com, a small hotel in Samara, Costa Rica. CNC Surf School in Samara at cncsurfsamara.webs.com. La Vela Latina, a great sunset restaurant in Samara. Ambar Tequila at www.santosspirits.com, an extremely smooth tequila. Another cool little hotel in Samara at VellaBlancaSamara.com. And our newest paying sponsor, the Delicate Genius Houston Hedge Fund Manager. Thanks and God bless. Remember that I do, on the email alerts, put the transcript at the bottom of the email from the prior week. So if you don't like hearing me talk, which a few of you don't, you can always read it and comment back. Thank you very much. God bless.